Well, thanks so much, everybody. This is our spring health tech mixer. So, as usual, I see familiar faces and new faces. We do this about twice a year. This is our Boston office. Thanks for coming. We usually have a little panel discussion talking about interesting stuff, questions and answers, and then networking, beers. Pizza is coming at 6:30, so stick around. But thanks so much, and let's get started. I have here Eric, who we met actually. You were here. Were you panelists? No, you were just a very vocal audience, right? Two health tech mixers ago, Eric was here, and we had a really good conversation about early AI and the FDA. Eric now works at Olympus. Maybe you talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gregor. And thanks for having me here. I really enjoy these health tech mixers, and so I started out in my human factors career as a consultant. I worked in a number of different industries, in automotive, in MedTech. I worked on things like blenders, and ovens, and all sorts of things. And then I went over to Smith & Nephew. I met John and John Anastasiadis, who leads the human factors and design team over there. It was a nice transition because, and one of the reasons I really like these mixers is when you have human factors and design working together, that's when we're the strongest. There's some team members that I worked with over there at Smith & Nephew. I recently started Olympus, where I lead a human factors team, the U.S. human factors team.
Can you get here?
Oh,
Maybe talk about
Oh, talk closer to it.
Check.
Oh, it is.
No, hang on. Hello? Is this better? Hi. Okay, sorry about this.
Okay, all right.
Don't start over.
Very happy to be here. No, I won't. And I'm happy to be here and talk with Gregor and to meet Elizabeth and hear about your story as well.
Yeah, so now over to Elizabeth. We've known each other for a while. Wir können
Ja,
auch Deutsch sprechen.
das
Wir
können wir auch machen.
Wir können das Ganze hier
Ja,
in
wer
Deutsch
kann auch
machen, wenn
Deutsch
ihr wollt.
sprechen?
Ja.
Nein, mein Deutsch ist nicht gut.
Anyway, let's go back to English, otherwise, you know.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
gonna
might
be
be,
the two of us.
okay. So anyway, delighted to be here. I started out my career, many years ago at Siemens in Germany, actually. I spent about half my career in Germany, about half in the US. But I worked in telecom for quite a while, moved over to the medical device space some years later at Zymedica in Rhode Island. Zymedica that's now Veranex, for anyone who's following the name changes. But my background's in applied clinical psychology and applied cognitive psychology, goodness. And I work now for AstraZeneca, but specifically in a company called Evanova. We are a wholly owned health tech company, wholly owned by AstraZeneca, and we create solutions that are used in clinical trials. So we have tools to essentially design the clinical trial, but then also tools for the clinicians who are running the study to monitor the data coming in from patients. And then we also have an app that patients use, connecting with wearable devices, at-home use devices, et cetera, all of the things that you might imagine. So really end-to-end across that, and it's just been really exciting to bring together, my background from consumer space and medical device space, all into this extremely complex regulated space. And now AI is changing everything at breakneck speed, so I'm excited to jump into our conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, I was really excited when Elizabeth and Eric said they could join us because I think both of them have a wealth of knowledge in the space. So we're gonna do a couple quick Q&As and talk about some of the aspects and then also open it up for some questions. I think one thing that struck me is that I feel like maybe 2 years ago, AI was really more a tool that supported you in like low level functionality, and and nowadays, I mean, every time we work on a med device, there's kind of an AI component for reading data, interpreting data, kind of building upon that, and the FDA is not really, I would say, too keen on that, like changing data sets. So my first question really is like, human AI interface. Where do we feel that we are now? Where did we come from, and where do we see the future?
Start?
Sure. It is changing so quickly, week by week by week, which I'm sure many of you are also experiencing. But one of the things that has been really fascinating to me is the multi-agentic systems that we're able to create coming out of research. So basically we have so many members of a global study team creating a clinical trial, and we can create really sophisticated agents playing the role of each of those individuals in creating clinical trial documents, et cetera. And for me, the real challenge is thinking through what do they understand, right, about what AI is doing, and how are they interpreting it, how are they able to check it, and essentially how is our user interface communicating to them in a way that allows for appropriate trust calibration. And that's like the big question on my mind at the moment is like, hey, are we doing the right things in that direction, and how can we be confident? But over to you.
So along similar lines, so most of the work I do is in the surgical space, and so right now, practitioners haven't learned with AI. They know how to do their job, and they see AI often as a tool to make them more consistent or to augment what they're currently doing in some way. But that's going to change very quickly, as we have people in medical school right now who will grow into the profession with these tools at hand and trained on these tools. So I think, you know, similar to what Elizabeth was talking about, first giving these, you know, this current cohort of practitioners the transparency that they need to adopt and trust these technologies. But then also, when you have people who can't do procedures without it, is it really enough to just give them that confidence interval, or do you have to go beyond that and say, no, this is going to be accurate every time because you can't do the procedure without it? So that's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, right? Because doctors are under a lot of pressure because they really have to, you know, have a high throughput of patients, and there's a lot of routine things that AI could really do better than them, right? So I feel like in an ideal world, some of these routine tasks could actually be augmented or really facilitated by AI models or AI data sets, and then it gives the individual doctor maybe more time for kind of the extra things that they want to do with the patient. I see that as a positive. But also, you know, we do a lot of imaging platforms in the cardiovascular space or in the neurospace, and, you know, just like stent sizing and kind of like, you know, stent deployment. There's a lot of people actually, it's kind of like, I would say like a black art. So kind of really having some sort of AI model that helps you kind of see that you're on the right path is really a life changer for all of these people, even that they're very trained, competent physicians.
That's a good point.
Yeah, where do you guys see kind of the FDA on this? I feel like every time I have a conversation with technology, there's always this, how are we gonna get this through regulatory?
Yeah, I can start. So, you know, with AI and with other new technologies, regulators tend to be slow to react, and obviously they're under a lot of pressure to react as this technology is growing very quickly, and it's a, you know, it's quite in the public eye. And I think that there are two sides of it. The regulators want to make sure everything is safe, but they also have a lot of bureaucracy to deal with. So I'm hoping that as new regulations come out, they are really focused on kind of a risk-based approach and really understanding, you know, how things may scale over time, and being able to let manufacturers adapt to that and kind of work within those guardrails.
Yeah, agreed. I am kind of curious to see how it evolves. Right now, when I look at the FDA guidance on AI for medical devices, it's like, okay, I really appreciate the core principles that they're driving home. It's like, does the user know AI generated this? Do they know how to check the data themselves? Do they know where the sources are? And do they know anything about the degree of confidence that AI has in what it's putting out? And like, can you show that? I'm like, okay, foundationally, that's a great start. You know, answer those questions, and then they point to the human factors guidance, and it's like, okay, this feels like a good start. To be honest, I was pleasantly surprised at how thoughtful that was, given, you know,
Right.
it's the FDA and this is moving fast and they don't always, so, yeah, pass that back.
Makes sense. I think one thing that I was really surprised is when they announced that they're gonna replace the MAUD database, which, who has ever been on MAUD, it is the worst piece of technology ever written.
Yes.
And you constantly have to check, and it's, you know, technology from the 80s? I don't know.
Ancient.
Yeah, so replacing that with a large language model is gonna be a lifesaver. So I think there's definitely some things that are going right?
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, going a little bit outside of, you know, I would say AI, I don't want to have this be like the only topic we cover, but obviously you work on surgical tools and you work on software as a medical device. I think it's interesting that in a sense, like, I would say we are at an interesting time in MedTech where I feel the technology is there to really change the patient experience or even the physician experience, right?
Yeah.
But we're still kind of lagging that kind of tight integration with technology. I would love to hear from your guys' perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. There are so many topics from here, but one of the things that is quite heavily on my mind, and it's just an interesting challenge to unpack, but in the clinical trial space, not only are clinicians getting a large amount of data coming in from clinical trial participants on portals, but basically every pharma company has their own portal.
Right.
And then many of them have other portals that they're partnering with that have other adjunct devices. And so we have people saying, you know, for any given study, a clinical trial coordinator might be using 8 to 10 portals. And if you have them working on 3 to 4 studies, they could be using 30 to 40 portals a day. And now what we're saying is, wow, we have this amazing remote patient monitoring tool at Evanova. It's very cool. One line on that really is the reality of cancer treatment is that if it's not closely monitored, if your side effects aren't closely monitored, the treatment could get you before the cancer does. And so we have some pretty sophisticated ways of monitoring the impact and toxicity of that treatment. And then the concern is, how do you get that data through to the clinician through the noise of the 30 portals that they're using, and when they open any given portal, that's not the only piece of information in front of them. So that challenge persists. I feel like it's always been there, but it just keeps getting more and more intense. And yeah, the risk trade-off is significant.
So I'm going to bring in some kind of automotive side of things into this, and then I'll bring it back to the MedTech. But I'm thinking back to 10 years ago when every car company had a different app that would let you connect your phone and broadcast it onto the infotainment system. And I spent a lot of time in cars with those systems, watching people try to use them. Some of them were okay, some of them were better than others, but that was a part of the marketing model that they were using for these vehicles. And then Google and Apple came along with CarPlay and Android Auto, which I'm sure many of you, if you drive newer cars, have used. And it works the same way in pretty much every car. Maybe the screen is different or the way you interact with it is different, but it works about the same way. And so I look at the operating room, for example, and you've got all of your data on the capital equipment that you're using, on your surgical robot if you have one. You have these PAC systems that were designed to store this data and catalog it. But every company has its own platform that they're trying to sell in the operating room. So I was thinking the other day about this, and it's like, how do we maintain, you know, the commercial desirability of having this data and collecting this data, but also provide a kind of a more unified experience in the operating room where everything is interoperable and talks to each other using the same language.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because these, you know, a car, in a sense, gets replaced every 3 to 5, 10 years, right? I mean, hospitals, you know, replace their surgical suites every 30 years.
Right.
So the adoption curve is way, way longer. So it's going to take a while for these doctors to have a unified patient experience. just because of the way the industry is run, right?
That's a great point.
But I think it's interesting, right? Because there is, when you look at reimbursement, right, there's the hospital systems that are, investing in capital equipment, and obviously that's reimbursed through CapEx, kind of like, pay down model. And then there is the code model when you have a procedure that basically you get reimbursed for that usage, right? And I'm sure for Olympus, they're always like, what is, we're giving away the console to get like, consumable sales. So, love to hear a little bit on like how, that model is now being kind of disrupted by AI potentially.
Yeah, I think that the closest model that many of these, so it's hard to sell software licenses to a hospital.
Right.
You can't sell tokens that each case they're going to purchase a new token to use your product. I think the robotic systems have created some sort of sales channel for these sorts of things, but for software that is an enabling technology that can help a surgeon do a procedure, it takes a long time to prove outcomes that are, patient outcomes. And robotics went through this as well. It takes a really long time. So we need to find new ways to develop claims around these sorts of systems. And I think you probably work on this quite a bit, but how do we show that the value while we wait for the value to show in the patient experiences that we have?
Yeah, and honestly, like from the patient experience angle, it is all about, the waiting is so real, right? It takes so long to get a new drug to market, and it can be absolutely life-saving. So our primary focus at the end of the day, we are here to, as Evanova, to bring life-saving drugs to market faster, right? So how can we get that faster? One of the huge ways we can make that happen more quickly is by reducing the number of patients who drop out of clinical trials. Because that, you have to have X number of patients go through, so you can end up extending your study on and on and on. And so we're actually also working on bringing, humanity, if you will, and compassion to the app. And it's an interesting balance, speaking of regulatory bodies, right? We're walking this fine line. Right now, everybody's created a solution in our app and most of the other clinical trial apps that are very sterile. Right? And now we're trying to okay, how can we push the edge of that? How can we recognize, thank you so much, how can we show gratitude? How can we show support?
Right.
All about reducing that wait time.
Right. I'm going to have one more question and we're opening up to the audience, but with AI and a lot of data comes a huge potential for personalization. However, I feel like MedTech is still a one-size-fits-all model. I think it's interesting to see. I mean, we were just working on a medical study, and we're doing a intravascular imaging platform for the brain, and we worked with pediatric surgeons. They're like, it's too short. My baby's up here. I can't use it. We're like, no, you're only gonna get one probe. We're not doing a pediatric probe. But I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Is
Go
that
ahead.
me?
Go ahead.
Whoever wants to take that hot potato.
Yeah, so personalization is I think goes with some of the other topics that we've chatted about, like providing the right information at the right time, knowing your user and trying to understand what they need. And it's easier with software to do that than it is with hardware and integrated systems. But perhaps perhaps as manufacturers, there's some benefits to using AI to compare devices, right? Or show the similarities between devices that are more unique to a certain user group or even an individual.
And I have to jump in on this one because from my lens of the world, the headline is IRB, right?
Right.
Everything has got to go through IRB approval, so every single word has to already be pre-written in the software, right? So we are working on trying to do a degree of personalization, but it's like, okay, it's really changing what chunks of pre-approved text you deliver when, and I am really curious to see where we're really going to start pushing the balance of what will we be allowed to do.
Right.
So ask me in a year or so, and I'll know more then.
Yeah, I think, with the explosion of software as a medical device, I'd love to hear from you. I mean, you came from the device space, right?
Yeah, right.
You spent decades in the device space. How is your job different now?
Well, I will say we're very much skirting the software as a medical device space. Everyone's sort of a little afraid of it, honestly. I really thought we'd be plunging in more. But it is interesting to me, and part of it is the consultancy world where you're really rapidly going through multiple medical devices to market quickly, and then the corporate space. But yeah, I would say it has been really eye-opening to kind of see the other side, the software-only side, and always kind of looking at, okay, when do we tip? And is there more value in tipping across that line? I guess
Right.
that's really the key thing, right? When you cross that line into SAMD, there's a lot more work that goes with it, and you've really got to decide, are we providing a significant amount of value on this side of SAMD? And we really are. And so that's just this consideration. And with the medical devices, you're never at, you are a medical device 9
Right.
times out of 10, a few exceptions, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to open it up to people in the audience.
Yeah, when you were talking about data points and AI, and maybe because I hear a lot of biotech conversation in my dinner table, and I know there's a lot of eyes leaning in towards China, and you were talking about fragmentation, different platforms, and data sets. How do you see that in device? Because they obviously have big hospitals and better or a unified system. Is that something that you see in your industry going in, or trying to look at those potential as data
Sure, I
points?
understand. You mean specifically looking at expanding into China and working in that market?
Doing development there, so afterwards when you do the FDA here, the risk is reduced.
Right. I know it is one of the most rapidly expanding spaces, so from where I sit in the world, it's really understanding the data privacy policies and understanding what research we are allowed to conduct there from a UX research perspective. So I probably couldn't speak quite to the clinical development side of it as well. So, yeah.
And, no.
I don't have anything on
Okay.
on that clinical development.
So how are the systems, the AI systems being developed now, being designed to counteract and overcome this inherent bias that's historically found in medical solutions? A lot of the data captured is still from, you were saying about automotive crash test dummies are still males from post-World War II, so these soldiers essentially, and so that doesn't compare to what the population looks like today. What are the kind of, if you're developing the AI systems, what are you keeping in mind with the framework? Is that part of what's being developed now?
I think that there's a great fear, obviously, in the bias being there. We were just talking about this at the beginning with Claude and Claude Code. I feel like if you carefully create a persona that has the right amount of data sets, and you're smirking already.
Yeah, it's like, it's great. Yeah.
It all comes down to the human who, puts that persona together, right? But there could be, there's an opportunity to create a lot of data set, a much larger data set that is actually much more customizable to individual patient populations than before. But is it going to happen? We don't know, right?
Go ahead.
So something that I've seen, at least in medical devices, surgical devices that are using AI, is that the regulators have very high expectations for, they want to see what data you've used to train the model, and how, making sure that you're not mixing your test data with your training data, and they take, there's a high level of rigor in the analysis that they expect you to go through, and then the testing that you need to do to prove whatever accuracy you're claiming to have. So for now, that's what I've been seeing so far, but the amount of data that we're working with now, there's going to need to be some pivot there.
Yeah, I think the good news is there's lots of data. The bad news is who's going to mine the data, to create the all-encompassing model. Gustavo?
I have a question about the opposite reality of so much data and so much knowledge, right? Let me give you an example. Sometimes I'm going to start talking to an AI about something, and the first thing I do is I post some pictures. And if I hit enter right before I even start asking, they're like, know it all. They're like, oh, I see that you're doing blah, 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 right? Now, compare that to a real user that you're trying to establish a persona, someone who doesn't have any of this knowledge, right? Could you train an AI to be like, forget how smart you are and everything else you know, like act as someone of this level of education, this level of, in this region of the world? You see what I'm saying?
You can actually.
Yeah,
I think
you
that's
absolutely. Yeah, no, you absolutely can. I've really been amazed because we've been playing around with different persona models in Claude and building Claude skills for persona Claude skills. And you can absolutely say, you know, assume a 5th grade reading level and assume this geography. I haven't pushed it fully globally yet, but just even within the US, you can give it demographics. And it's been then just testing it and saying, okay, what would your feedback on this be? And I've been pleased to see that it reflects what I've also experienced as I run research across different demographics.
So the results that you get tracked back to that expectation of the
They
level of
do.
knowledge?
Yeah, I've been impressed so far. Now, I would say we're not doing all of, as tempting as it might be, we're not doing all of our research with synthetic personas, synthetic users. So, you know, but in the initial explorations that we've had, I've been encouraged. As I think it's smart as a first round, right? Let's do a sanity check here, especially if you have new folks coming into the team who maybe don't know your patient population as well. It's like, hey, run it through this a few times before we actually then take the time of a real person to go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the opportunity with AI really is that you can build entire patient populations, right, if you have enough data. And that's really the power of AI, kind of organizing that.
Yes.
There's companies that build their whole business model around, you know, bringing patient populations to certain
So you can buy personas basically?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
You can buy,
Yes.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's pretty exciting.
I actually have a question for Elizabeth that's kind of along that same vein, but I imagine that in your space, part of getting drugs to market faster is failing fast in these clinical studies. So synthetic patient, failing fast when is a part of it at least, but when you know, in addition to simulating patients, is it possible, or have you looked into simulating studies to try and understand the likelihood of success after some amount of time? So.
Yes, no, so that's amazing. So I can now, like, you've set me up. So we have a product called Study Designer, and that is literally where we're going with it, right? And right now it can simulate, like, recruitment of patients. So we need to recruit patients globally, and it is very time consuming to recruit patients. You can sort of say, hey, look, if I have, you know, 20 sites in the US, 10 in China, 14 in Brazil, how long is my recruitment going to take? And it will start to model that out, right? But you can also model out likelihood of regulatory success, which is a piece that we're working on as the next step. But the vision is really to be able to model out how different aspects of a clinical trial could be successful, right? Whether it's regulatory success or whether it is recruitment of participants.
That's fascinating. That's
really
cool. Yep. Any more questions?
Yeah, with the huge amount of data that can be used to train models, my background is in diagnostics, so in laboratories and testing, you can get huge differences between laboratories or even across days in terms of results for the same sort of assay. So how do you ensure that the data that you're using to train the models is of sufficient quality to get what you need for that end product?
I work with people who can answer that question much better than I could, but what I can say is at the end of the day, it is all about the data.
Yeah.
Right, that's actually the real trick. I mean, building the models, that is a really smart thing, and knowing what to do with them strategically really matters, but it's all about the data.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But could be garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it is, absolutely. So you've got to have the best data set you can get your hands on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the really dirty secret about data science is data governance, right? And having the right tools to actually clean up data, because there's no clean data ever that you can get into a study. And by the way, I mean, every study is run different. All the results are slightly different, so there's a lot of work on the back end to make that all happen. A lot of manual work. Hopefully AI can help.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I've got another one.
Okay.
Well, since it's quiet. So, we spoke about the FDA being, quite slow in making changes, regulations, or bringing out new guidance. Are there any countries in the world, that you look at for, maybe being, having the best blueprint, to base future regulations on, or what you think, it's like California for certain things, actually if you do it this way, and it's going to be good enough for everywhere else.
I hate to say it, but I think China's done a really good job with their latest regulations. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm sure you guys are involved in all of these. I was talking to a doctor yesterday, he's from Pakistan. He said that, if you leave the US, there's a lot of innovation coming out of China in like stents, imaging, pharma probably also, I don't know not as much about it, but I feel like they've learned from the FDA model and they've put a spin on it, which is kind of interesting. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I think China has, at least in human factors, has really learned from a lot of the things that are still ambiguous in FDA guidance and made it more prescriptive. I know FDA has a draft human factors guidance that addresses some of those gray areas, but that could help companies move a lot quicker
Be
through
more competitive.
510K process or PMAs or whatever
Right.
sort of
De novos,
regulatory
yeah.
route.
Sorry.
You're good?
Good on that one, I'll pass.
Any more questions? John? Well, pizza is here. Thank you so much. And the part of mingling and networking is about to start. Thanks.
Thanks, Gregor.
Thank you.
Thank you.